youth to see with new eyes. So it oftentimes helps them to have an aha moment and realize that they are the agents. They are the people responsible for their own learning, and to have some intrinsic motivation, which we all know is the most powerful motivation that sticks with young people their whole lives into adulthood. And it helps youth and adults. So I've also taught adult ESOL for many years and citizenship programs in the United States. And the reminder that we always have a choice, given whatever circumstances we are, whatever classroom we're in, the students always have a choice in how they learn and what they're using the learning to do, based on their goals. So I like to begin with a quote by Dr. Viktor Frankl, who is one of the founders of positive psychology and purpose-based learning, which is that life is never made unbearable by one's circumstances, but only by a lack of meaning or purpose. Okay, so why purpose and meaning matter? Well, I mentioned briefly, I'm the research consultant for this project called the Youth Meaning Index. And we've surveyed over 10,000 youth and growing in 12 countries, but more are joining. And this was a project originally in coordination with UNICEF. So we have a lot of really good contacts with people and young people on the ground. And these are the main drivers of meaning that students across the globe, across cultures, find meaningful. Social connectivity, being connected to one another. None of this will surprise you, right, as teachers, but it's important to remember, and we'll talk about why. Self-care, emotional and mental well-being, and physical and cognitive engagement. So this is the type of engagement that really makes the student feel like they are the agent, that they're actively involved in their own learning process and making decisions for themselves about their own learning. And finally, purpose. Does my learning, does my English language learning or whatever course I'm in, is it personally aligned with my own meaningful outcomes, with what I find most meaningful in life and where I'm hoping to go in life? So just a quick question for all of you to consider: how are these drivers relevant for language learning communities? Right? If you could pick one of them and apply it to your own teaching this week or over the past semester, which one is really valuable? Or perhaps maybe they all are, right? So let's dive into why they might be relevant, okay? All right, so in a global context, we know that there's a lot of difference in cultures. And we know that even from family to family, sometimes in the same community, there are a lot of difference in values. But they're surprisingly similar because all humans need meaning, and meaning is important to all youth. And they show up in some nuanced ways, of course. So for example, in the countries surveyed, some youth from collectivist cultures report a higher emphasis on social connectivity, whereas some more individualist cultures, think of Scandinavia, perhaps countries like the United States and Canada, they prioritize self-care and purpose-driven goals. And probably countries like Russia, for example, may lie somewhere in the middle, right? And in all cases, meeting basic needs such as security and safety is essential for young people to grow and to find meaning for themselves. So creating a safe space for learning and a place where a student feels safe and secure, having their basic needs met, is important for the beginning of that journey of seeking meaning in their lives. Okay, so why do we promote purpose and meaningful engagement? Well, here's a little bit of research insight over multiple studies over the past few decades. Purpose-driven learners, so learners that have their higher purpose or their purpose for going to class, for pursuing an education, they have that in mind, they're much more motivated and they demonstrate much more persistence in difficult tasks, right? When things get hard, they keep going. So finding a purpose and helping students to find their own purpose or reminding them of that, that generates optimism, right? There's hope, there's a goal, there's something that they're working towards. And knowing that you matter, that what you are doing in the world matters, that generates responsibility or the ability to respond to any circumstance, right? I broke that word into two parts: my ability to respond to life, to the career that I would like to pursue, to the college or university entrance that I would like to gain. And students can respond to whatever happens in life with dignity and courage and compassion. That's our goal, right? To help the students understand that they can be courageous and compassionate, that they can do the things they would like to do. And there are, as we all know, students face multiple challenges, existential crises. There are things going on in the world which perhaps they don't have control over. Tragedy happens, right? Change happens. And there's a lot of uncertainty about the future, particularly for high school and college students. And our role as teachers in generating and helping students generate meaning is to help them realize there is always some meaning, and there is always a choice for them in terms of what they would like to use their unique talents for and how they would like to show up in the world. And hopefully English will be a part of that, right? One of the things with language is that we open up new doors of thinking, and we allow students to think outside of the box of their own language. And we also allow them to connect with young people and other ideas from across the globe. So here's an example of one purpose-based intervention, very simple, and the results. In a recent study, so a single 45 minutes, so less than an hour, conversation with an adult, a teacher, a mentor, someone who the young person looks up to, was enough to increase purpose scores, so how that young person rated their purpose and how they used it in their education. Just that short intervention of a conversation about, have you thought about your purpose? Why are you here? What do you want to do with your English language education? And helping students think deeply about that is perhaps one of our key jobs, as teachers. So another exciting use, technology, of course, with all of its pros and cons, offers us as teachers a lot of opportunity to give the student a window into meaning. So what do I mean by that? Well, technology interventions for youth that suffered from mental health issues or other mental health concerns identified these areas as helping them to solve that. And you can think of mental health as, for example, suffering from some level of depression or anxiety. They could be facing a difficult life circumstance, right? So things that are really responsive to interventions. And things like role playing, interactive online modules, gamification, which means turning a language thing into a game, or some multimedia content from native English speakers that are doing amazing things that are similar to the experience, or where the student can see themselves in someone else who is suffering or going through a really difficult life challenge. And then they can relate to that, right? They can see how they might overcome based upon what someone else is experiencing. Excuse me. And here are a few experiential. So when I say experiential, what I mean is replicating the real world or doing something in the real world, maybe outside the classroom or inside the classroom, where it somehow connects to the world outside. So, for example, a student can take on roles such as a customer or a job candidate, right? That's always a fun one for their ideal job, or a traveler, right? Traveling in an English-speaking country. And the learner will build this conversational fluency. They get to practice situational vocabulary, but most of all, they improve cultural competence and they feel as if they're part of a community, part of the target language community. And that, in my opinion, that is perhaps the most important thing in learner motivation, is helping that student feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves and knowing that other people will benefit from that, right? So immersive virtual field trips have been growing with the advent of better and better technology and internet connection, where a student can virtually visit a place they've always wanted to go and learn about. So some of the key elements to this are hands-on activities, an opportunity for diverse perspectives and mentorship, and just really the ability, again, to connect with that target language community. The other area which is my area, or one of my areas of focus, and one that I work with young people as a coach and as take students on retreats and trips, is this movement and sports-based. So when I say that, essentially that's whenever we get young people outside and moving together. It can also be for young adults or older adults. This could be something as formal as dance or theater, but it could be something as simple as going for a walk and giving the students a pair question. So to talk within a pair and walk together, right? It could be something where you partner a younger student with a mentor, or with a high school or a college student, and you ask them to talk about a question in English. You know, what is your favorite quote? Or what is one way that you would love to see the world change? What is your favorite, whatever, and then tell each other about it and discuss why it's important to you. You know, a simple question like that, two people will talk all day. They'll get started and they won't stop. So what does this do? What does integrating movement into the classroom do? Well, it cultivates body awareness and self-confidence. It creates a caring climate that is youth-centered. It's a very task-oriented environment. And if we do pairs, then it creates quality adult-youth relationships, right? People naturally bond with others when they're moving together, even in the course of a short period of time. Okay, and finally, in this particular area, I would like to share a little bit about fostering social connectivity in the language classroom. So the role of learning communities is to create trust, right? For someone to feel like they're a part of a community. So when they feel that trust, or when they feel a part of a group, then they will automatically feel motivated to contribute to the group's improvement, be that in English skills, or a group task, or peer learning, or even a virtual language exchange. You know, if we can make them feel connected and a part of something. We all know ways to start to do that with icebreakers and with a task that the whole group has to accomplish together, maybe even some form of group competition between different groups, and then coming together to celebrate one another and your creation or your accomplishment. But there are other ways to do that too, which is more purpose and meaning based. So let's explore some of those. Recent neuroscience studies, with the benefit of some of the technology that is able to scan the brain, tells us more information about collaboration. So experiential learning and purpose-based learning, so focusing on the purpose, the higher purpose for being there, helps brain connectivity. including executive function. And collaborative tasks allow us to improve our attention over time and also improve cognitive adaptability. So that's the area where students are able to switch between different tasks, and they're able to be really adaptive or flexible and to try new things. And they're more willing to do so if others are doing it, right? If they're doing it together. And socially meaningful interactions, so interactions that students see as meaningful, contribute to that linguistic skill and also to neural plasticity. So the plasticity of the brain, the ability to make new connections, and especially important in language learning. So here are a few applications. We can design more immersive projects as much as possible. We can leverage collaborative learning, so we can boost motivation and retention. And we can also focus again on community-based strategies. So what is one way that we think about community-based? There are a lot of ways. One of them would be to connect with the community in mentoring. So if you are teaching middle or high schoolers, that they would then partner and support younger learners. If you're teaching adult learners, that they would have English conversations with younger learners, and maybe the younger learner is more skilled, right? But one person is gaining wisdom and the other one is gaining English language experience. You can even do this within a classroom, but creating that feeling of community usually depends on creating a task or a fun project where they have to work together to finish it. And there are a lot of examples of that. I'm going to be sharing resources, resource page with everyone so that you can, find all those activities for yourself and decide which type you would like to focus on. Okay, so social emotional learning is a word that we hear a lot of because it is so effective. Essentially, social emotional learning techniques help students develop self-awareness, self-management, relationship skills, and allow them to make more responsible decisions in life, but especially about their learning. And in particular, language learning, we see tons and tons of applications of this, being empathetic, being sensitive to the cultural differences of the target language community, and also helping the material to be relevant. So here are a few examples. I'll allow you to just read for a moment. In the first, the students write a personal narrative. They call it My Story in a target language, right? They could reflect on some key life moments in the past or some future aspirations. And there's all sorts of ways to amend and diversify this. But the goal is to foster self-awareness and practice storytelling. And the one thing that is common across all human cultures is storytelling and learning from stories. So that is a very practical, very easy SEL activity that you could do on a weekly basis, and just amend the prompt, amend the activity for storytelling. The other area of SEL, which is very important, is self-care. And I know that in many places, meditation is not as popular, but we have that entry into saying, well, in English-speaking culture, meditation and reflective journaling are really a part of SEL classroom practice, standard things that students do. And so to get into that English-speaking culture, you can use guided meditations that are in English, and you can pause for 5 minutes during class time to help the student become more aligned and more connected to how they're feeling, to their breath, to any emotions, strong emotions that they may be having, that sort of thing. And I will again be sharing my suggestions for those guided meditations And on the resource page, the resource document, which I believe our moderators will be sharing with you as a Google document. And there'll be links there. The one which I use most often, which is a free, no commercial free site, is called Insight Timer. And I'll type that in the chat, and it will also be in both the end of my presentation resources and in the Google Doc. Okay. All right. And so let's look for just a few minutes at examples that are age differentiated, okay, that are appropriate for different ages. So these are all of ones that I have used at various points and that I find to be really effective. These are just examples. There are many more in the resource kit, the executive summary that I gave you. But these are just a few of my highlights. And I actually did highlight them. You can see they're highlighted there. So for example, for lower elementary, you could think about creating emotion cards in English to help students identify, and maybe translate them because they're new English language learners. You could create a kindness tree. This is especially a good one around the holidays, around Christmas and New Year, because students are thinking about how to be kind to their friends, their family, and their neighbors. And then you can put leaves on them and add to that tree as a student does something kind for their family. They can write it, simply in English. You can help them, or you can have a partner help them to write it out. And then they read each other's acts of kindness, and they get ideas, right, as to what they could do. For upper elementary, you could think more about empathy and personal goal setting. So you could have the students interview a peer about a favorite memory, or maybe an act of kindness that they've done, right? You could extend that kindness tree activity. And they could practice active listening just by saying, okay, you're just going to listen for 2 or 3 minutes to what your peer, your classmate says. And don't offer any commentary, just listen. And then your partner will get a turn. Your classmate will get a turn. Again, doing this with some combination of English and native language may be helpful. So setting some parameters around that. For middle schoolers, things like conflict role playing, using I feel statements, helping the student become better at expressing their feelings in English. I feel this when this happens. This frustrates me, and I feel this, or this makes me sad because, and explaining why. And for teachers of middle schoolers, really any age, young people, I highly recommend the cognitive behavioral training for teachers. This is the proven most effective way to deal with difficult emotions, particularly trauma. And cognitive behavioral therapy is the most effective intervention for most of those issues. And there's a training online that is free for teachers in English, offered by a university in California and an institute that organizes it. You can do a certification, and I provided that link in the resource document as well. For high school, my number one recommendation, you can do debates, you can do service learning, which is a great opportunity, but gratitude journals, especially when students write them in English, seem to have just this magical way of opening up their day. So you can do it at the end of the day and have students write, 3 things that they're grateful for, maybe one thing that they would like to do better tomorrow, that they hope to be grateful for in the future. And just by reminding themselves of those 3 things, you'll be amazed at how the positive emotions increase in the class and how they share them with one another. So gratitude journals also have this powerful effect of having students start to focus on the positive, right? And on things that maybe they would like to be cultivating. So I really like that as an option. For college students, gratitude journals certainly are effective. and mindfulness in learning, having some global dialogue, so connecting with another student in a class overseas is certainly an option. And for adults, again, gratitude journals are effective, but story circles, the more experience that we have, the more stories we have to tell, the more effective things like story circles can be. In addition, if you are teaching adults or young people with jobs and other responsibilities, something like a stress management workshop may be really helpful, because if your students are stressed and they're not coping well with their emotions and their responsibilities, then they're probably not present fully in class, right? So having a stress management workshop, a very simple one in English, and I provided some resources for that as well, may help the students to be more present in your class and be more purpose focused on their purpose. Okay, so this next one, I'm just going to invite you all. We're going to do an activity together, and you're going to do a very short purpose intervention for yourself. Try it out, and we're going to talk about it. Okay. All right. So here are the things that we're hoping to cultivate in the classroom. We cultivate purpose explicitly. So we help students identify goals, think about their purpose, think about the meaningful outcomes, and how they're contributing to society. Meaning-based classroom practice also provides opportunities to reflect, and it creates a safe space where we're open to sharing. Okay, so I'm just kind of priming us here for why we might use this particular purpose intervention. I'm going to ask you to do a short piece of writing. I want you to think about 3 ways which we might realize meaning. All of these, there's no one that's better than another. All of them are equal. And probably you have used all of them in some degree, and maybe simultaneously. So again, this is from the work of Dr. Viktor Frankl and purpose-based psychology. And we think of experiential values as being values in encountering someone else. Some of the questions you might ask are, how are you loving? How are you helping? How are you contributing? How are you supporting? Creative values have to do more with what you're creating in the world, how you're bonded to others, what gives life value, what you're creating. And finally, attitudinal values are for yourself or students, helping them discover the attitude that they are taking towards challenge, towards problems, towards suffering, that are all part of life, right? And transforming that perspective through their attitude. Okay, so experiential, creative, and attitudinal. Okay, so here's the task. I'm going to give you an example first of one of mine. So in my own journaling, one of my purpose statements is I seek out, foster, and praise the best in others, including my students and my family. And 3 values or virtues that I can think of that might help me in that, or that I'm hoping to develop, are honesty, willingness to change, and unconditional love or support, right? So willingness to change being that I need to admit when I'm wrong and be willing to listen to those who are wise, including my students. Okay, so now your turn. Here's the prompt, okay? Consider your own life purpose, or even just purpose for being a teacher, all right, in 1 sentence. Not too complicated. Or the closest thing you have to one. If you don't have a purpose, that's okay. Just, the closest thing you can think of. Write a sentence, and then try to come up with 3 values or 3 virtues. You can think about that experiential, that creative, or that attitudinal value that might help you to reach that goal or that purpose. Okay, let's just take 1, at most 2 minutes. Okay, go go ahead and do that for a minute. Okay. I don't want to take too much time here, so hopefully you came up with a few. And you can imagine how that would be effective for students as well, particularly students that are a little older and may have thought about the why behind what they're studying or what they're doing with the English. So you may have identified in your own purpose that beyond the self purpose, it refers to the goals and aspirations that transcend your personal gain, right? So focusing on your contribution to the world and to others. Sometimes a student will say something like, well, my purpose is to get rich or famous, right? Or to get this really nice car. And that's okay. You know, any purpose, any goal that they have is fantastic. But then, if we can challenge them to think more about that, well, why do you want to have fame or more money? Well, I want to provide for my family, or I want to build this thing that I have a dream of building, right? And that's what we're getting at, what they want to really do in the world. So why does it matter? Because increased engagement, students will have higher levels of intrinsic motivations when they're reminded often of their purpose for being there, and possibly for their community and the world around them. It also fosters resilience and perseverance. When students, they fail, we all have setbacks, but that fail can just be a learning experience, a way to get better and better if they see it as a progression, towards fulfilling their purpose. And finally, the social impact. So students learn the value of contributing by reflecting on that beyond the self purpose. And I think probably all of you, at least part of your purpose that you identified, you can see how that is about something beyond yourself, right? And focusing on that aspect of purpose helps us to enhance our social emotional skills and to have empathy, because we begin to realize as we hear other students, other fellows around us, other human beings share their story and share their purpose, we begin to recognize that we are part of something much bigger, and that everyone else is trying to work for something good as well. So that social impact is really important. Some other insights from research is that beyond the self-oriented mindset helps us to achieve long-term goals and really helps with future-oriented thinking. When life throws us a curveball, when we don't get into the college program that we want, or when we have to shift gears and do something different, then we're not so distraught, right? We see it as just another opportunity to work towards our purpose. And it shifts focus away from performance and towards an ethical and collaborative and meaningful pursuit. So in other words, it makes us better global citizens. And again, we feel more connected to that target English language speaking community. So what are some of the practical ways or practical best practices? That's a tongue twister. Try saying that 10 times. Some of the practical best practices for our classroom. So one that's really proven is to use service learning. And if you can, target language skills. So again, I mentioned peers or community impact, wherever possible. Things like language learning partnerships are wonderful. You can also facilitate discussion on how learning connects to global challenges. So in my native language, right, climate change or global warming or the environment may mean one thing. But when I expand it to listen to English-speaking voices around the globe, young people my age, then all of a sudden it changes, right? Our mind expands. And again, promoting storytelling and journaling activities. I can't say how important it is for students to reflect on their own learning in order to become more reflective, have more agency, to be more engaged in their own learning. And encouraging them to journal in English is, of course, great too. Okay, so a little bit of debrief on Beyond the Self. If you can help the students to feel like this picture, like we all have our hands in the middle, we're all in this together, we're all working towards a common goal, then your job is half done, right? Then your teaching is almost a secondary thing at that point. You just have to give them the task. You have to give them the goal, and then they work towards that goal together. That is the ideal classroom environment. And focusing on something beyond the self, how I can help create and cultivate a good English classroom or a good community of learners, helping them to see that as part of their beyond the self meaning, then they all put their hands in the middle. Okay, so some of the benefits for classroom teachers of applying meaning-based curriculum or purpose-based interventions. It helps us to see what we do and that we can make a difference in the world. It helps us learn to accept that there are some things as teachers we cannot change, but that we can allow students to change for themselves. It empowers us with responsibility, listening to that inner voice that calls out to us as this being important, and students see your passion. It helps us to find a strong enough reason to make the sacrifice as teachers, which is a huge sacrifice every day, no matter where you teach in the world. And it also teaches us to transcend our ego, because quite often my ego is the biggest thing that gets in the way of me being an effective teacher, in order to give the students the control and let them say what is valuable and important to themselves. Okay, so within the classroom, what choice do we have? Well, again, for us as teachers, and something that we hope to pass on to our students, right? I think if we can get these three things right, then we will be really effective in the area of meaning and help our students to have more purposeful learning. So the first one is our attitude. So we reframe so that we continually have an attitude of growth and gratitude, of love and hope, especially of hope. Because if a student has hope, then they will continue to strive, right? So reframing failure as an opportunity to growth, reframing a disappointment and an inability in English language learning to be an opportunity to communicate with someone we want to communicate with. The action and responses. So this healthy tension between where we are on this side, let's see if I can get my hand in here, on this side, and where we want to be on this side. So I think it's really important in this, what are my actions? What are my responses? Noticing, helping the student to notice, right now, I'm right here. my English is here. This is what I'm able to do with my English. But this is where I want to be. This is my ideal. And this is why, right? This is what I want to do with it. And that space between those two places is what I call the healthy tension. And then we have to be courageous in setting really challenging goals and risking to try to get there, and compassionate because when we set big goals and when we have big ideals that we are trying to reach to, we're going to fall short sometimes. And being compassionate with ourselves and with our students is really important. And finally, expectation. Setting expectation is kind of part of that as well. I'm open to learning and finding purpose, even in the most difficult of circumstances, difficult classrooms, setting our expectations of others not so high that they'll never get there, but setting our expectation of ourselves that we're going to respond, with kindness and compassion, and continually reframing the attitude to be one of gratitude, love, and hope. Okay, and then I wanted to share this quote as we get close to finishing. This is again a quote by Dr. Viktor Frankl, whom I pointed out earlier as the creator and founder of this movement in positive psychology. From this point of view, growth towards maturity in meaning involves replacing false certainties with true certainties, things like hope and optimism and gratitude. It means learning how to cope with natural level of complexity, right? And live in the valuable partial meanings that individuals can construct in connection with community life. So it includes valuing traditional meanings in our traditional cultures, even if they are reinterpreted anew from generation to generation. So the reason I like this quote is because it tells us right from the start that if we're trying to apply meaning in the classroom, a search for meaning, that there's going to be complexity and there's going to be areas where we disagree, right, with the students and with one another about what is meaningful and what is most valuable. But having that conversation and empowering the student to have that conversation, that dialogue with themselves, with their own conscience, and with one another is where that's where the magic is. Because once you get students talking about how they're making meaning of the world and how they're pursuing their purpose, then that story continues. They will carry that with them into their learning, into other aspects of their lives, and hopefully developing that intrinsic motivation to learn and to apply English at all levels, right? And feeling like they're part of something, of other people struggling to find their meaning, is really something powerful. Okay, so just a quick review here. We'll be finishing up in 1 minute, and I'll outline all the resources that you can follow up with. So to review, to notice purpose is to be conscious and aware. So to be conscious of the world around us and aware of perhaps where we're being called to go, to do, to use English in this case. To be responsible. I'm responsible for my own choices and decisions, and to decide and make those choices. And again, to have a self-transcendent or a beyond the self meaning that incorporates what we're really called to do in life, not just something that I want or a goal that I have, but some sort of a higher meaning that I'm striving for. And remembering to ask the student why. When they tell you that goal, you say, well, why? Well, how about you dig deeper? Why? What do you really want? And ultimately, I think you'll find eventually that all students and all people really want to be a meaningful part of a meaningful whole, a meaningful community, to feel loved and to feel comfortable and to feel successful, like their talents are being used, that they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. And they're all going to do that in their own unique way. So to be confronted with problems and to have agency and solving them, responding to them. So the problems of our generation, the problems that we face across the globe, and the problems that we face in our community. All of these are calling out for responses from young people and from English language learners. And finally, to change and recognize possibility for change. So sometimes we get so stuck and we think that we're stuck in the place, in the family, in the patterns that we've been passed down. But giving that student a chance to see that change is possible and possibility for change, that's done through storytelling, through examples of peers and others in the English-speaking community and in their native-speaking community that, they can do this, that they have all the tools that they need and all the intelligence they need to be successful, right? And I see a few questions popping up. I'll get to those in just a moment. And some perspectives that help. Again, I mentioned this before, we're here for a reason. Every moment in life is a once in a lifetime invitation. Every classroom, every student. And we have unique tasks to perform as teachers, and we are responsible for shaping our own lives and of course, our own classrooms. So you have the ability to respond. All right, so I think that pretty much wraps up what I have to share. I'm going to answer those questions now. I'll leave this slide up for a moment, and I have a few closing slides with resources. What role does culture play in helping students find purpose? And what could be the ways to help a student during class when the student's life is quite stressful? They're always coming tired to the lesson. Yeah, great questions. Let's tackle the second one first. I think that students being tired and having, again, difficult home life or other job responsibilities is very real, right? It's something that we have no control over as teachers. I think our number one task is, again, to respond with empathy and open communication to any problem that students have that we don't have a solution for. In other words, making time to talk to that student one-on-one and to just encourage them, to let them be seen and know that you care. And oftentimes that gives the student energy, it gives them hope, it lets them know that they're not in it by themselves. But above that, it just sets up a better classroom environment for everyone, where all the students know that, that the teacher cares and that we're in this together. Now, with regards to their individual life circumstance, you might, challenge them in some writing or speaking activity to talk about the factors that are making them tired, and to set a few very simple goals, top 3 goals of how they would like their life to change so that they would have more opportunity to be themselves, to show up the way that they want to show up. And sometimes for them, just noticing those top 3 things, those things that they value, may be enough for them to make some adjustments to their schedule or to ask for help, right? Usually it's something where they need to ask for help or they need to look at alternative solutions that others have. If they're open, you can involve everyone or a few other people in helping them to solve that in small groups. What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now? What do you think would help? And then ask a few peers for advice, for help in that area. And that allows the peers, the other students, to be a resource and to feel valuable, right? So one student's being vulnerable, the other students feel valuable. And then they are more likely to share when they themselves have a problem, to be vulnerable to the other student because they know they're also struggling with something, right? And certainly, so with regard to the first question about culture, I think that's a very broad question, and meaning is certainly also connected to and rooted in culture. But like I said, there are certain main drivers for meaning that cut across cultures, and kind of how those play out in individual cultures is much more nuanced. So I don't know I have a very clear cut, but I do have some resources for you to read more on, okay? I would like to share with you this executive teacher summary, which the moderators will share in the chat. I have it as a Google Doc. You can download it as a PDF slide. It has hyperlinks, so it has a lot of links to resources. You can also email me if you have follow-up or additional questions. I have my faculty email there at USF, so that's the University of South Florida, and then my first initial and last name. So feel free to take a screenshot of that. But I've also shared it in the resources document. And the resources document looks something like this. I've partitioned it off into really easily followed links and resources. The web pages, all of them here, are really accessible and easy to use. For example, facilitating global connection for students. How do I do it? Well, this website will get you started. For example, the cognitive behavioral intervention. If you want to pursue some training yourself, then you can register and go through. I think it's like maybe a 10-hour training or something like that. There's a Harvard resource for developing empathy and purpose among students from Harvard. And here are some more practical classroom tools. And again, this is on the resource document. Sown to Grow is a great goal setting platform. Everyone loves goal setting. There's also the Insight Timer page that I mentioned. And I have my own Insight Timer page where I offer some guided meditation on movement therapy, on recovery from trauma and things like that for students and teachers as well. And really interesting, if you search student meditation or learning or test meditation or relieve anxiety, something like that, you'll find lots of great resources there on Insight Timer. Okay, I believe that's everything. And I do see a third question there. Top 3 goals, current life or top 3 goals they would reach to solve during a lesson. That's right, either one. It depends on how large you want to go in terms of framing the purpose discussion. But yeah, I think both are great. And I look forward to hearing more of your questions by email if you have them. And it's been really a pleasure to spend time with you today. Thank you for being here. All right. So I see I actually have a few more minutes. I saw the timer went to 1 hour, so I thought they were going to cut us off. But yeah, so that is all the additional resources that I have. But in terms of other questions you might have, again, feel free to put them in the chat or message me. And I hope that you both enjoyed this, and the resource document will give you some more ideas for what you might be able to do in your classrooms.